and inclusive as we inspire love, work for justice, and grow together in community. Wherever you are this morning, we welcome you. May our time together be filled with joy, with belonging, with hope, and with the promise of who we can be together. We extend a special welcome to our visitors, especially our guest speaker, Jill Winegardner. Thank you for worshiping with us this morning. Visitors, if you'd like to know more about our church, please contact our administrator to be added to our e-news list or to be welcomed by our welcome team. I also thank our tech team, working for hours behind the scenes, the leadership of Reverend Stephen Protzman, and the many others who make our worship and community possible. May you live in interesting times. That's an old curse and a favorite of mine. Interesting times offer us a unique perspective to ourselves and our relationships with one another. They can give us insight into new possibilities we hadn't considered and a path to the future we hope for. Today, we're privileged to have someone with us who witnessed firsthand the Nicaraguan Revolution in the late 80s, then lived in a revolutionary community in Managua, Nicaragua, from 1990 to 1993, which was just figuring out how to enact their revolutionary ideals. And she has remained committed to the people of Nicaragua for decades through the Terrabona Health Project. Jill Winegardner is a neuropsychologist who first traveled to Nicaragua in 1988 to teach neuropsychology and found the Association of Neuropsychology in Nicaragua. The Terrabona Health Project is a rural clinic providing medical services, training community members to meet basic medical needs, doing preventative care, education, nutrition, vaccination, and more. We are now in a global pandemic. Never in my lifetime has it been more clear how literally the health of our community depends on the health and care of people around the globe. Our country is in crisis, divided in protest of the injustice, racism, and exploitation which many Americans face daily. I wonder, what does a country in revolution look like? How does Nicaragua's revolutionary spirit compare to social movements in the US like Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street? How has the Terrabona Health Project sustained or transformed that spirit into a successful organization doing great work for nearly 30 years? Jill Winegardner gives us at least one answer today. In keeping and creating the connections we have with one another. The connections we make during these interesting times can help us do the long work of caring for our community. And the degree to which we widen our circle and make new connections can sustain us long term. Now, in community, in connection, we join together in worship. We join Unitarian Universalists across the country in lighting a chalice, a symbol of life's beauty and wonder, a symbol of peace and hope, an invitation to continue our ongoing search for the light of truth within us, among us, and a reminder that we are all interconnected in the great web of existence of which we are all a beloved part. As I light our shared chalice, I invite you to light your home chalice. Would you join me now in the words of our covenant? Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. In the spirit of deepening our connections, creating a sense of belonging, and offering each other support and compassion, we take time now to share our joys and concerns, our struggles and achievements, our hopes and dreams with one another, in faith that we are truly listening to one another and that our care makes a difference in each other's lives. Please use the chat box to share your joys and concerns with one another, which I will share aloud for people who are participating audio only. Swani Vinayda welcomes Jill Winegardner and wishes Ted could be here. Jill Forsman has a concern that there was yet another shooting in Georgia. Colin has a joy that the riots seem to be calming and has been working on the front lines as a medic. Thank you. Thank you, Colin. Vivian is thrilled that a new group has formed, which is called Allies for Racial Justice Portage Summit, and thanks the founders of that group. Randy and Renee hold their sister Janice in care. She is living with stage 4 cancer and has 2 new spots, including one in her brain. Janice will be receiving radiation next week. Let us take a few moments of silence to hold those we've named in our hearts and minds, and to honor our connections with one another and with the spirit of life.
there, kiddos. So this week, in the last few weeks in RE, we've been discussing our sixth principle of building a fair, just, and peaceful world together. And we've talked a lot about what can one little person do to change the world, to help the world, and to put more love into the world. And I've been so proud of each and every one of you hearing what you are doing out there to make this world a better place, to make it more just and peaceful. So I have a story for you today about one little girl who did some very similar things. It's called Supriya's Bowl. So it was once, when the Buddha lived and famine had struck the land, the rains failed and the heat of the sun withered the harvest in the field. All around, the cries of pain and hunger could be heard. In the midst of this misery, some people grew very greedy and selfish. The Buddha's followers came to him and brought stories of sadness and shame. One merchant said to the Buddha, "I was in town and I saw another man hurt one for a bag of grain." "I heard someone who sold their last goat to buy flour," said one, "and on the way home they were attacked and the flour was stolen." Saddest of all, Lord Buddha, are the stories of the children who are hungry on the other side of town because the wealthy have hoarded all of the grain and milk and sugar. "Call all the people together," said the Buddha. "Let us see what we can do to help." The next day, the Buddha's followers came to the meeting. Hundreds of them came, rich, poor, well-fed, starving, all of them came out of respect for the Buddha, and they wanted to hear what he had to say. Buddha said, "Citizens of this fair land, surely there is enough food in your storehouses and in the storehouses of the wealthy to feed everyone. If the rich share what they have in this lean season, then we will all survive and enjoy the benefits of a good next harvest." The poor and the hungry looked hopeful, but the rich, they grumbled. "My granary is empty," lied one. "The poor are lazy. Let them work for me. Then they can use the money to buy the food that I have stored," said another. "There are too many poor people," said the third. "They should move somewhere else." The Buddha sighed as his eye fell upon the people who had hearts of stone. "Is there no one here," he finally asked, "who will take on the job of helping to feed our community, the poor and the homeless in these hard times?" There was silence. And then one small voice popped up. "I will, Lord Buddha." And out of the crowd stepped a small child, no more than 6 or 7 years old. She was a merchant's child, and she was dressed in silk. "My name is Supriya," said the child, "and I have a bowl that I can fill with food for the hungry. When can I begin?" The Buddha smiled. "Small child, your heart is filled with love, but how will you do this alone?" "Not alone, Lord Buddha," said Supriya, "but with your help. I will take this bowl from house to house and ask for food for the poor. I will not be refused. I just know it." Looking at the child with earnest face and shining eyes, even the most selfish of those in the crowd grew ashamed. "I have a little grain in my storehouse," mumbled one. "I have some pickled mango from the summer harvest," said another. "Oh, my father was poor once, and now I am ashamed that I had forgotten that." Then Supriya took the bowl and went every day, house to house, gathering small bits of food from each person, and little by little, the bowl was filled. Sometimes an old grandmother would fill it with rice. Sometimes children even gave up their sweets for the day. Often others would join Cypria with their bowls and help take food to the hungry, to those who needed it. And sometimes it is said that when Cypria was tired of walking, the young child would sit under the shade of the banyan tree, and when she woke up, her bowl was magically filled. Now, said Cypria, the hungry will eat, and the people of this town will take care of each other. And then they did.
Our first reading is by American abolitionist Frederick Douglass, who wrote, "Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out what people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice which will be imposed upon them. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." Our second reading is by Roman Catholic saint Mother Teresa, who wrote, "Love cannot remain by itself. It has no meaning. Love has to be put into action, and that action is service. Whatever form we are, able or disabled, rich or poor, it is not how much we do, but how much love we put in the doing. A lifetime sharing of love with others."
Today, I will tell the story of Project Terrabona, a small health project in Nicaragua that will soon celebrate 30 years of work. This is Javier on the left, our nurse, who's been central to the project from the beginning. This project has a local connection too. I met Ted Venida some decades ago, and Ted and Swanee have been donors to Project Terrabona ever since. They read the annual newsletters and believed in this work enough to financially support it, even up through the loss of Ted this past year, with their inclusion of the project in his memorial service. Swanee is the reason I'm here today. Now, you may very well ask, why in the world should we care about a small Central American country when we are coping with a pandemic right here in Ohio, the likes of which we've never seen, along with massive racial injustice? And what can we learn from this little land? This church's mission is to inspire love, to seek justice, and to grow in community. I invite you to reflect on whether this mission and your covenant are reflected in the work of this small remote health project, born in revolution and powered by faith and justice. Nicaragua is the largest country in Central America, about the size of New York. The population's about 6.5 million, and it's a land of volcanoes and earthquakes. It's mostly Catholic, and it's the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, where 80% of the people live on $2 a day, and a third of the children are malnourished. My interest goes back to the 1980s, when the Sandinistas had overthrown 40 years of dictatorship. the Sandinista revolution was in full swing. So I'm a neuropsychologist, and I first arrived there, as Andrew said, in 1988 for a health rights delegation, and I stayed to teach neuropsychology to professional psychologists in Managua for a couple of months. Now that was my official reason, but my real reason was that I was so curious to see what a country in revolution looked like. And it was amazing. This revolution was built on unity. It started with peasants and students, but gradually the middle classes joined, and eventually all segments of society were united against the greed and corruption of the Somoza dictatorship. The elections in 1984, in which Daniel Ortega was elected president, was the first fair multi-party election in Nicaragua's history. The key driving philosophy was the option for the poor. In health, hospitals, small health posts, and clinics sprang up everywhere. Preventive care was prioritized, and polio was eliminated. Healthcare was free. Imagine that. In education, the National Literacy Program sent students from the cities to spend the summer in the country, in the countryside, harvesting coffee and teaching the peasants there to read. Illiteracy was hugely reduced from over 50% to under 13% in just 5 months. Education was free. Imagine that. Land was confiscated from the rich and shared among the poor as cooperatives. I remember walking around Managua at night without fear and seeing the police as our friends. Imagine that. I felt safer in Managua than I did in Cleveland. Imagine that. Many wealthy and privileged people fled the country, but they were a small segment overall. There was an amazing unity and dedication to shared values that drove everyone in the country. There was excitement and hope in the air. There was a strong sense of everyone working for the common good. I decided I had to go back and live there. But sadly, by the time I returned in 1990, the Sandinistas had lost power after the Iran-Contra wars and the election of Violeta Chamorro as president. She was backed by the US. Nevertheless, the spirit of the revolution continued in many sectors, and I was privileged to live in Barrio Walter Ferretti, a very poor barrio in Managua named for a Sandinista military hero. The barrio was founded in 1989 with land that was given directly to war-disabled people and widows and orphans of Sandinista soldiers. It was a strong and revolutionary community. Life changed from living within a revolution to seeing the revolutionary spirit survive changing times. Let's see how those values survived. So when I returned to the US in 1992, I continued to support the barrio's community center. And this was the birth of Project Terrabona, initially called Project Children's Health. So the slide is me with community organizer Esmeralda Lorente, a powerhouse. We started the project by paying her salary of $200 a month so that she wouldn't have to move to Florida and wash dishes to support her family. Economic justice. The Health Post focused on primary and preventive health care for women and children. Health justice. There were work days for education and sanitation, and even a dog day where all the dogs in the community got rabies vaccines and antiparasitics. Community involvement. In 2004, we received a large individual donation from a US donor that allowed us to build a new health clinic that served thousands of patients for vaccinations and primary health care. Global solidarity. Here is just one example of the health activities of the project. This is Tanya. She is a brigadista de salud, or a volunteer community health worker. She's your neighbor who has special training from the clinic nurse, Javier, in basic first aid and preventive health. She might see a baby with diarrhea who needs oral rehydration, or a boy with cuts on his legs from falling out of a tree, or a mother with a bad headache who needs a pain reliever, or a child with a fever whose mother needs advice on caring for her, or a young man with a machete wound who needs her to clean and wrap the wound, give him an aspirin for pain, and send him for stitches to the health center. My support has evolved over the almost 30 years of its existence, from the early Project Children's Health to what today is called Project Terrabona. Although there have been changes in venue and in specific projects, the project has always been grounded in the principles of the option for the poor and the rights of everyone to health. It has always been driven by the needs and wishes of the Nicaraguan people involved in it, and by the changing realities of different moments in time. It has never been a project of charity. It has always been a project of justice. In 2014, the project followed clinic nurse Javier Loaziga to a rural community north of Managua to work in a local health clinic there, alongside colleagues from the Ministry of Health. Since then, Project Terrabona supports the salary and a small expense budget for Javier. Javier has been the one consistent person in this project for all the nearly 30 years, starting as the nurse in my barrio in Managua. His focus has been on bringing preventive health and public health to the clinic, as well as offering clinical services. The project serves 3 little villages, Marronito, Pacora, and San Roque. Javier works with a full-time nurse and a doctor who provides consults in the morning. He continues to focus on extending preventing services with programs through the local schools and other community organizations. He also takes on some patient visits that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Now, the health clinic was improved last year. And when I say improved, prior to this, it didn't have running water or indoor plumbing. So now it has a consult room for gynecological exams. It provides oral rehydration for patients with acute severe diarrhea. It has an observation room to monitor patients. And here you can see the sink in the treatment room and the toilet. So imagine if you had acute severe diarrhea and you had to use an outdoor latrine and wash your hands from a dirty well. We're told that the reason that the health clinic was upgraded by the Ministry of Health is specifically because of the international connections of our project. So when I visited a couple of years ago, I took a lot of pictures there, and these are patients in the outdoor waiting room, which is just a bench outside. And here is Javier, who is helping a man who severed his finger and giving a woman an injection for her monthly birth control. So Javier is also busy outside the clinic. So a while ago, there was an outbreak of Leptospirosis, which is caused by water contamination with rodent droppings after flooding. In response to this, Javier and a team of his health workers went house to house to distribute rat poison and to educate people as a prevention measure. A blood drive was held in San Roque, where the clinic is located, organized by Javier and the Ministry of Health and other local health workers. And donors were given transport to encourage their participation. House-to-house visits are routinely made to elderly people and those with chronic conditions. The checkups focus on both medical and psychological health. Javier makes hundreds of home visits to raise awareness about various problems related to health. In these visits, he also identifies pregnant women women who hadn't come for prenatal care or brought their children in for health checks, and malnourished children. During the visits, he educates people about both personal and environmental hygiene to help avoid outbreaks, and he teaches people how to prevent disease. Vaccination campaigns are joined by community leaders, health brigades, even the national police, imagine that, who maintain security and provide transportation for patients to come to the center or take vaccines to the home of people who aren't able to travel. Now, today is a very different moment in time compared to the early years of the Sandinista revolution. Daniel Ortega returned to the presidency in 2007 and remains there today, but he's become a different leader from the idealistic young revolutionary of the 70s and 80s. More on that in the forum, come and hear more. But essentially, he has become authoritarian and corrupt. Does that ring a bell for our president here? So in April of 2018, the people rebelled and were violently suppressed by the government, with over 300 people killed. Health workers who were not Sandinistas were punished, and many of them fled the country. Today in Nicaragua, now more than ever, it is essential to have non-party driven healthcare workers on the ground doing the essential work. I was in Managua shortly after the uprising in 2018, and I witnessed the massive protest in Managua at the top of your screen. Just recently, I also took part in a Black Lives Matter protest in Cleveland against racial injustice. And I participated in a moment of silence at my hospital, University Hospitals in Cleveland, in memory of George Floyd. So many similarities there. Today, in June of 2020, the Nicaraguan government's approach to the COVID epidemic is to minimize the cases. They are actually burying people in the middle of the night to hide the bodies. There's no quarantine, and the government has even organized mass events, such as a march called Love in a Time of COVID-19. They might be even worse than our government. Given the massive poverty and inadequate health resources, we can expect dreadful consequences. So now more than ever, HADER's work of educating people, implementing preventive measures, and taking care of the sick is vital. When I was asked to give this sermon, to be honest, I was a bit terrified. I've never done such a thing, so I tried to learn more about the values and beliefs of the Unitarian Universalist Church here in Kent. I was directed to the 7 founding principles, and I was so impressed with their clarity and wisdom. I spent some time thinking about these principles in relation to their connection with Project Terrabona. I picked a couple to share with you. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. Project Terrabona serves the neediest of them all. Nicaragua, as I said, is the second poorest country in the hemisphere, with sky-high rates of poverty, malnutrition, and misery. Our project provides health care for those most in need, such as hungry children and old people housebound by chronic illnesses. Everyone receives services according to need without regard to ability to pay. Each person is seen as having inherent worth and dignity. I don't believe in artificial boundaries such as land and water, so I don't prioritize people in any one country over those in another. Everyone equally deserves peace, liberty, and justice, whether they live in remote Nicaragua or in Minneapolis or in Kent. I would love to invite you all to the forum following the service for a longer discussion of the Nicaraguan social and political context and more details about Project Terrabona. And you can find out how you can connect to this project by emailing me. So here's my email, write it down, and I would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Jill. This morning, the offering will be gratefully received for Project Love Light, an organization we collect for annually at this time of year. Love Light is a social service agency in Kent that was formed in 1995 to assist individuals and families, especially those who are lower income or otherwise disadvantaged, to move toward the actualization of their potential. Their major focus has been on children and youth within the context of family, neighborhood, and community. They are guided by and promote three principles: respect and care for self, respect and care for others, respect and care for the world around you. One of the services Love Light provides is a summer program that includes games, art, learning opportunities, and lunch for more than 100 children and youth. In the spirit of gratitude, the gift of one another and this community and the abundance that generosity possible, their commitment to the life and work of this congregation and of the needs of our greater Kent community. Our worship service is ending, and we extinguish our chalice. Together we say the words, "We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. May we carry these in our hearts and minds until we are together again." The world is too beautiful to be praised by only one voice. May you have the courage to sing your part. The world is too broken to be healed by only one set of hands. May you have the courage to use your gifts. May you go in peace.